Hello, and welcome to another installment of Promax Asia webinar. We are very happy to have with us CEO of Reliance Big Synergy, Rajiv Bashi, and his guests, each of them leader of some of India's most well-regarded OTT powerhouses. We'll join them shortly as they look at how their industry has raised to meet today's challenges. Now, should you have any question that you'd like to ask, you can put them down in the Q&A section that is at the bottom of your Zoom window, or upvote the question that is already there. And Rajiv will take some of those at the end.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're just getting started in a minute. I think these were three spectacular sizzles. Clearly tells you the kind of content which is coming out of India. It is my kind of absolute pleasure to introduce three of these stalwarts, good friends, colleagues, and people responsible for this fantastic sizzle and all the content that you saw behind them. And I can tell you, this is only 60 seconds of what they're doing. They're doing hours and hours of content, which is spectacular in every form. So before I get into the discussion with each one of them, let me briefly introduce them. I'll start with Aparna. Aparna is the head of programming for Z5. She has something very unique about her. That is that she's been working on a digital strategy with Z Group for the last maybe 2008, 2010 onwards. So she's kind of a, in a sense, very young, but veteran of the digital industry, so to speak, of India. So she is the youngest veteran of Indian OTT industry, Aparna Acharekar. Thank you, Aparna, for being here today.
Thanks. I like the young part.
Yeah, of course. And then just as young is Saugata. Saugata, again, I think has a very rich and diverse experience. One, of course, in publishing, where he was the editor for Pan Macmillan, editor-in-chief. But besides that, he's worked many years in broadcast in Star Network. And if some of you are enjoying the Star Hotstar specials, I think we have somebody like Saugata to thank, because he's been doing some great work before he moved from there. And now he wears a new hat as head of original content for Sony Live. And we have a few things to ask him, because I think if we have someone who's taken the extreme advantage of this current environment, I think it is Sony Live. And Saugata, I'm sure, had a great, great hand in that. So Saugata, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Yes, and then of course we have Gourav Rakshit, the CEO, so that I don't get the company wrong, Viacom 18 Digital Ventures. Now, Gourav is a digital veteran. Before he came here, he got actually lakhs and lakhs of people married through his role as president and CEO of Shadi.com. So he understands the promise and commitment of digital better than most of us. And he's been forming alliances of individuals in the sky. So Gourav, welcome. And since Gourav has joined, I think he's done two spectacular things for Voot per se. One, of course, brought the Voot AirWatch service bigger, and then launched two spectacular services. One is Voot Select, and second is Voot Kids. Again, a very unique product for a country with 400 million kids under the age of 14 to launch a special service dedicated only for kids as standalone service, not as part of vertical of the same platform. So between, Saugata, Aparna, and Gourav, we have something like 60, 70 years of experience with dealing with content, consumers, brands, and it's going to be a very entertaining discussion. Guys, it's going to be a frank, freewheeling discussion, so no holds barred. Please be as candid as you can be. Saugata, I have to start with you, since you took the kind of big decision of, in a sense, relaunching Sony Live during this period. And why we're doing this at this time is, of course, this period is unique, because while everyone is, and it's very unfortunate, so that we very clearly state that there's a very unfortunate period, and most of the industries are suffering. But if every day one reads in news today, is the OTT industry seems to be growing from strength to strength. Even in this period, it had a tremendous role in kind of keeping people at home by offering the kind of content it offered. So media had, I think, a very, very critical role to play in this lockdown, both broadcast and digital. But we're going to focus more on digital right now. Saugata, relaunching Sony Live at a time like this, was it, maybe a decision which was already made many, many quarters back? Or is it something you saw there's a right opportunity to do?
Thanks, Rajiv. Well, frankly, the relaunch was planned. The COVID wasn't, right? it got thrown into the scheme of things, made things more difficult. These are unreal, unforeseen times. We didn't plan for this. No one planned for it. But what we are very proud of at Sony is that in spite of all the issues with the lockdown, with personnel not being available, working across geographies on the tech bit, we've managed to pretty much launch on time, which I thought has been a spectacular effort by the team at large, right? Uh, I think we planned to get into Sony Live 2.2. The plans were there from last year, and we were working towards getting the UI UX changed, the content piece rolling. We had everything in place, and in fact, I joined early on in this year, and I had my roadmap rather well cut out. It's just that middle of March, the world threw in a googly, and everything sort of took a different turn. But having said that, there's been a lot of interesting learnings in the last couple of months. You know, the launching the app is not easy, and I'm sure Gourav and Aparna will tell us a lot of their little learnings. But for us, it was partners working on different geographies. It was not easy to sort of bring them down in a war room kind of a situation and launch on time. Yes, like we all know, it's strange times where the everything sort of taken a nosedive. The OTT viewership has really skyrocketed. We're not complaining for that, but I think it'll be great to come back to normalcy soon enough. We launched like 10 days back, maybe a little more, 12 days back, and I must say that we are very, very happy with both the numbers and the viewership and the subscription. It's been quite a journey, and we felt that we've sort of capitulated on a lot of things which was thrown our way, but we managed to sort of maneuver around. Yes, yeah.
It's been a fantastic launch, so congratulations on that, Saugata and team. Aparna, I'm going to stick to the similar thing. You know, we viewers sit at home, we enjoy content which comes on digital. Sometimes we get peeved at why the new episode or new series hasn't been launched, new season is not coming. Even in this environment, I think viewers are not understanding how difficult it is to churn out content, especially in this period. Including me, I'm waiting for my episode of Billions is not coming this Sunday. It's been 2 weeks and I've been kind of very upset as to why it's not coming. I mean, ZEE5 is, supremely differentiated on one thing is the kind of pace of content that you churn out. I don't know what is the average. Is it once a week, once new series a fortnight? But I know even in this period, you were taking out content like almost every fortnight, a new series. So help us understand what was going on when you heard the lockdown. You and your team, you knew while there is a lockdown, you still have a job in hand. How did you manage this entire environment with your team?
So I must credit it to the team for having planned a lot of things better. So, even when we walked into the lockdown and all shoots stopped, and even when some shows are already shooting and we had to call the teams back and things, we did have a bank. So releasing that bank, ensuring that post-production got done very early on. I mean, I think we were only in the second week of March when we moved all post-production facilities, as much as possible to people's homes. So I remember, I think it was 15th or 16th of March when a lot of our OAP team members and other team members, or even production houses who we were working with, we ensured that people took, as much as possible home and equipped them with good broadband before things stopped. So that kind of really helped us sail through the April and May. Some very smart acquisitions and moving very quickly on some lockdown specials helped us even keep the momentum. So we had launched this show called Never Kiss Your Best Friend in early part of the year. and we did a lockdown special to that. So the same characters, but twisted a bit in the story, saying that okay, now the best friends are apart, and what do what happens to them? So that was almost like an everyday situation that we were all in. So some very smart thinking, quick, agile thinking, speed of execution, the team coming together very well, and really, I'm sure that has been the mantra for everyone who succeeded. So that's how we've managed to sustain through the period.
But Aparna, when you heard of the lockdown, and of course the new term for us, none of us were prepared for this. Like Saugata said, we were not prepared for this. We had no understanding that it's even possible, something like this. What went through your head? Because you had perhaps 10, 12 series in your head, which were going to go through the next 8 weeks. What happened? What was the moment like?
So when we first heard the lockdown, we all thought it was for a couple of days, right? We knew it was the first 3 weeks, and first it was Maharashtra, so you were thinking it's 31st March, and then it was 14th April. But the moment we said, okay, no coming to office from tomorrow, that was the first day we decided, okay, let's do it as if we were in a state of high emergency, right? And then you can always calm things if they don't go into that sort of an emergency. But we kind of put it on such high speed, and acted as if there was this national lockdown immediately, and from tomorrow you were not getting to move out at all. What would you do in that scenario? So the last person in operations to the senior most people, we ensured that people had a minimum 50 Mbps to 100 Mbps broadband at home. So whether it was file transfers, or a lot of my creative leads have been editing over Zoom, right? So they're sharing screens and editing over Zoom and things, and that's really how we have worked in the last 3 months. And this is across languages, across centers. So Mumbai, Hyderabad, Chennai, all of these centers. And I'm sure it's similar for most in the industry, but when your target is to release one show a week, right, in one language or the other, of whatever scale that show may be, right? Because it's a consumer promise to keep a SWOT, to keep a subscription going. And when you're, always competing with the big daddies who will possibly launch shows twice your size or twice your cost, you have to be in that sense, agile and very quick in your thinking and execution. So yeah, that kind of helps us.
Yeah, fantastic. And on behalf of millions of viewers, let me say thank you to you and your team for keeping us happy and entertained at home in this difficult time. Gourav, besides, of course, content, you also hold the business role. And it's been said that almost all industry are going through this period with a lot of, anxiety, anguish. Some are going for bankruptcy. Some are getting decimated completely. In my view, there are 3 sides or 3 coins to this industry. One is the supply side, one is the demand side, and third is the business side. How did you read this entire crisis from all 3 sides?
Sure. Candidly, like you mentioned in the opening, we had just launched Woot Kids in November. We had launched Woot Select, first week of March. And we were all set to stabilize things. It would have been a fairly crazy period for us to launch these 2 subscription businesses back to back, try and get them out there. It had already been a war zone. And so it was now time to sort of, get things settled. We had a pipeline and stuff. And when this particular lockdown situation came, frankly, it was all hands on deck. It had to be, and virtually. So that was similar things to what Aparna did. We were already on high alert, so having machines sent to people's homes and things like that was just automatic. It was not even, you couldn't think about it because we had a launch, and it was our first. We were just getting into the market. That at that point, fortunately, at least there was more a business continuity thinking than a business viability thinking. We just launched. There was no question of pulling back a launch. That was first week of March, and so we just had to go. There was no question of should we temper it, should we slow it down. We was just go. So that was a fortunate thing. It was not a decision to make. I think for the first and everybody on the team them operated in that fashion. So all the way through from March through April, even through middle of May, I think we were just doing, and people just didn't take a breath. Then slowly one realized that if this is going to be for keeps, then you've got to sort of take a step back and figure out, this is real life. These are people's lives. They're inside their homes. They're working from their homes, and they're doing significantly more than what is reasonable on a working day. And at some point, this has to give. And so that's when we started to at least figure out how do you balance that? How do you now start to re-architect what you're calling business for the long term in lockdown? Frankly, till the end of April, at least, we hadn't really thought about it. Now we have a better sense of how we want to operate.
But did the demand growth, was it a bigger advantage than the business challenge? Did it more than compensate?
It's a good point. I think, and the panel that you have, we all also run advertising businesses. We all have subscription business advertising. Subscription businesses obviously just took off. I think that was a great fillip to the industry. What would have probably taken us a year and a half, took us a month essentially. So for me, it was just dumb luck to launch at the right time. It was great, and we had obviously planned it, but it worked out very, very well on the subscription side. On the advertising side, obviously not so kind. Advertising is a discretionary part of people's spend. And so to that extent, that's something that not just us as digital businesses, but all parts of networks have to be cognizant of and have to start to project the future. So that demand side, there was both the yin and yang, there was good, there was bad, there was all of that happening on the demand side. Supply side was a real problem. I think, as Aparna mentioned, we had some stuff that we had shot. So editing was something that we were able to work with, but and a lot of stuff in development. So even that was slower. It was working, even working at a virtual writer's room is not quite the same thing as, you'll know that, Rajiv. It's not the same thing as being in the same room. So those were slightly slower. Not being able to shoot, certainly a problem. I mean, that's something that we're all obviously itching to get past right now, because in the end, that's where stories are finally being and told. So that's what we're looking forward to, a little bit more, little more daylight. I think there is light at the end of the tunnel, but just a little bit more daylight so that we can power through. That's where we are right now.
Aparna, you and I have discussed, the kind of data that you get and how you study consumer behavior, and you have, realms of data on consumer behavior. But in this 3-month period, you must have also had some time to analyze data as to what's happening. What changed in terms of data capturing, in terms of growth or surprises? How was the behavior so uniquely different? Because not many people have essayed that. We understand there's been a growth, but I think it's too simplistic a line to say it's just gone up. Were there surprises? What happened? And did it change your thinking at some level for the future?
So the consumption, the minutes that people were consuming every day significantly grew, of course, because all of us had a lot more time on our hands. We were not traveling. So your minutes consumed, there was a marked, sorry?
I said not you and your team.
Sorry? Yeah, we were watching our own content, and then, when we were tired of watching our own content, we would watch something else that was happening in the world if it was not the news. But yes, so the number of minutes consumers were consuming significantly went up. In fact, some early data showed about 87% increase in viewing minutes. The day part completely changed. So earlier, it used to be evening prime time, because yes, there's a lot of catch-up effect happening on broadcaster platforms, and then there is the late night viewing that happened. We saw a significant amount of viewing even happening during afternoons now, because people, of course, had a little more time on their hand. Weekend started early, so weekend effect you started seeing right from Thursday. So possibly the one that started Friday night or really peaked Saturday, that started from Thursday. There was a marked change in the way content was getting consumed on different devices. So connected TVs, in that sense, in urban India really boomed during this time. So while not much viewing was happening, not much buying was happening, viewing really, really went up. So whether it was people consuming news channels, whether it was people consuming series or movies, a lot of our library content consumption also went up. So content that had a lot of nostalgic value and family viewing value, people started consuming that on their television sets. So right from the day part to time to devices, every metric that a business needs to understand and to see, to peek into the future, actually changed during this time. So yeah, the way the data team has been having a field day giving us insights, it possibly has never been as good before.
Aparna, I have to ask you this question. On one hand, we have this super premium Netflix kind of content. And on the other hand, we realize a 30-year-old series called Mahabharat on Doordarshan, the channel with none of us watch, has become the #1 show for 2 weeks. What does it tell you? While everything is available, suddenly this old show from nowhere in 30 years come back as #1 show of the country.
A lot of, and I don't have to possibly say this, but a lot of research around why the Ramayana and Mahabharata effect really worked on Indian television was one. a whole lot of nostalgic value too. During times of crisis, really भगवान के पास ही हम सब जाते हैं. तो भगवान के पास जाना ना पड़े इसके लिए भगवान के दर्शन तो टीवी पे ले ही सकते हैं. So a lot of nostalgia, the entire fear psychosis things, and if you read up online, there are a lot of research that's happened around why really mythological content did well. And if you see, all the broadcasters then brought back their earlier mythological shows, and everybody was running that during prime time. So yes, I mean, family viewing, of course, right? I mean, never have we spent so much time with our spouses or children. I don't think, I've been married for 15 years now, but 3 months of being in the same house all the time with my spouse has never really happened. So that's what it is. Yeah, it's a first for everyone. Even the children, for that matter, right? I mean, you needed, see, when you were watching series or movies, possibly bring a lot more people together. But when it's series, each one of us has our own likes and dislikes, right? Plus, if it's a web series trend today, most of them are 18 plus, so you're not watching them with your children anymore. But content, say like a Mahabharata or any of the TV content that we've had in the past, or movies for that matter, are great sources where families can enjoy together.
Absolutely. Saugata, I have to kind of come to you on this because you just relaunched a product. And here we have data which is suggesting Indians are still obsessed with mythology. We still want to go to content which is not just good feel, but also good faith. And your product today, is it going to focus more on what we call the Bharat? Or is it going to be more towards the metro, which is the India? Where are you crafting this? And with this data which has come in the last 3 months, does it change your thinking?
Not really. I think we've been very clear about what we are making for it. Basically, we also want to be a platform where we have a little bit of everything for everyone. So we're not particularly programming for the top 1% of the country. But having said that, we are very clear that the SVOD shows that we make need to be for an intelligent cerebral audience, right? So whereas some of them will break through and have a much more broader base, but I feel that it's important to tell those unique stories. But what we are trying to do is we are looking at different genres. We are genre agnostic. So while we are not averse to telling stories which may be from mythology, but it is not because it's just mythology, right? So because we will do it only if we feel that it has great potential to the kind of audience that we're catering to. Having said that, I feel that the idea of in Sony Live, what we are thinking of is that it's not about the scale. It's not about the big monies that one reads about and the big production costs and all of that. But I think it's important that whether we have a really great idea that we sort of support, right? That is where we've brought in some. If you look at a couple of the films that we have launched lately, I thought Ghostly has been absolutely astounding in its response, and it's a really, really interesting film about a migrant, right? And Manoj has sort of given his probably one of his performance of his lifetime. But if you look at that film would have been an extremely niche product. But looking at the numbers, it has absolutely astounded us that the kind of numbers it has got, it is equal to a very big film in terms of the so-called big that we call, right? So I feel that there's a lot of discovery happening. There's a lot of people are giving you a chance. People are out there to give you a chance and look at the kind of programming that you are doing. So we're very clear that we would want to tell the stories which are deep rooted in the Indian ethos, but the telling and the grammar needs to be very different from a lot of other things which are happening around.
Right. Saugata, I believe a brand is not just defined by what it does. It's actually more defined by what it will not do. So from a content point of view, have you thought of what you will not do, at least for the foreseeable future, to establish your brand through your content?
So I think one of the things that we are very cognizant of is that we are not very keen to do, big scale war drama, or, we are not very keen to do something which is slightly more on the, the unknown erotic kind of stuff, stories. That is not the zone that we that we are going into. We are very clear that we also don't want to over-index on the kind of genres where the gangster drama has become a big thing, right? I think there are lots of people doing great shows around that, but I feel that if there are many to choose from, why add to that pot again? Let's do something else. So we are very clear that those are kind of genres which we are not focusing clearly on. But maybe it's a dynamic thing. Maybe 6 months from down the line, if we find a great script, we'll not say no to it. But clearly, that's not the focus. We want to do shows, and pre-COVID, COVID's also been playing on our heads. We need to sort of tell stories which are a little bit happy. We want to also see. Hence, we want to tell stories which bring you a little smile on your face, right? So, as it is, world's sort of really thrown a googly at us, and it's not easy. So we are trying to sort of look at that space very carefully.
Absolutely, thank you, Gourav. You are a guru of data in the sense you blessed lakhs and lakhs of weddings in this country through Shadi.com. So, and so you know how to use data well. And I was in a discussion with a couple of very rich data scientists a few weeks back. While they, of course, started defending it, but I want to ask you, the past data, and which is pre-COVID, and now we have a COVID data. Can you extrapolate the past data in the future, or have we kind of have consumers leapfrogged and we become somebody else? And especially the data that is being captured in COVID, is it relevant at all? Or this is, it's got to be, negated as we come to the normal circumstances?
It's a good point. I think there are two types of data. There's trend data, which is more longitudinal. That is how you would consume something over time. And that I think COVID has fudged with. I don't think that's pure any longer, right? I think that there is also what we call preferential data, which is what you would like to watch. And that is more cross-sectional. That is you, Rajiv. And so you have not fundamentally changed, although you could have been a little bit more exploratory during COVID. You have more time, so your consumption has gone up. Maybe your willingness to be let down has gone up a little bit. But fundamentally, I can still use that data. In fact, it's more rich because I get to see many more facets of you in this where you're in this exploratory zone to build more interesting recommendation engines for someone like yourself. So that part of the data is still very, very solid. If you believe that this particular period has to be a projection of how things will play out in the future, that I think is where you're going to get misled, because I don't think that's going to happen. Like Aparna was mentioning, consumption is, through the day, it's you have a very different paradigm happening right now, as opposed to in very bunched up and parts of the day. So I think that's something that will normalize as we go forward. But what I know about you now is still probably worth its weight in gold.
Right. But, this period, of course, we want to kind of end this period. We hope this, there's a vaccine which comes in or a treatment which comes in soon and we come to our normal lives. But an extended period of maybe 6-7 months, will it change habits? Because I know people in print are very worried it's going to change habits dramatically. You may not ever come back to where you were.
No, I think a classic case of that is when our fiction comes back to our TV, for example. People have been weaned off that for some time. So how they're going to get back on is unclear. Nobody really knows. I mean, you could argue they just get back in stride, or they will slowly have to again build back the fandoms and the loyalties that they had to those shows, because that takes time to build also. So that I think is anybody's guess. In the OTT space, we've only had more, right? So it's not that we haven't had that sobering, if you will, of consumption. So we're significantly ahead of anywhere we could have imagined we would have been. At least.
Gourav, data is supposed to be a big defensive argument, especially when you have to, commission new shows or new strategies. And today, data itself is going to be a big question. Now, there is data to support every logic. Everybody has so much data now that is indefensible any point now.
The data is, we have a lot of wide data because we have a lot of consumers. We don't have very deep data. Our consumption history is not that deep. And so when you look at data science and you want to get patterns, I want to know more about you, not know how, 100 million people consume three pieces each. That's not as interesting as you over 10 years.
Right.
That's so.
And Gourav, you would have data on this because you run a very formidable kids network in the company.
Yeah.
And kids always have a habit of 2 months of holiday, and we know the peak of content. How did Woot Kids versus this period? This is perhaps a similar period. Maybe the parents
No,
were
no,
there, kids were watching less, then more. What happened
you're
during?
absolutely right. We were prepping for the vacation season. We were absolutely going into that zone, and suddenly we have now this extended vacation where kids are at school, but they're at home a hell of a lot more than they were before, and so the consumption spike is enormous. And that usual habit you have of a child watching one video, the same video, over and over and over. Now the number of times they're watching it is scary almost. That same piece of content, they've got so many opportunities to watch. So it has really reinforced some of those.
The earlier holiday period was without parents at home. This is a holiday period with parents at home, seeing what you're doing.
No, you're right. But our sweet spot, frankly, on Good Kids is really in the 2 to 10 space where, at least hopefully for a few years more, the device is given to you by the parent. You don't have your own device for most parts, but I think that's also changing. So in that sense, whatever I believe to be true or want to be true doesn't necessarily play out like that. And I think many kids are getting access.
I mean, it's a unique panel. All three of you, of course, in your continuation of the business, as Saugata said, we didn't plan for COVID, have done something spectacular during this period. You launched 2 products, Saugata relaunched a product, and Aparna only recently, maybe last week or yesterday, you announced this fantastic hippie, a short form UGC content play, which is very different to what you've been doing till now, which is A-word, S-word, long form. Now suddenly you have short form UGC and sitting on the same platform. That complicates life like nothing, right? And obviously you didn't react in 2 days. So I know you've been planning for it. It's not that, TikTok got banned and you planned it the next day. It must have been in the plans for a while.
Yes, it has been in the works for about 2 quarters now, more than 2 quarters. And this is part of our plan to become a super app, right? So whether it's the AWOD side of the business with offerings like TV content, maybe some free movies, some gaming content, kids content, news content, because as a consumer, you don't want consumers to spread themselves too thin and have too many different apps. A lot of phones in this country don't support having too many different apps. So if you have to be in the race to be among India's top 2 or 3, you have to give consumers as much as possible on one app. So Hippie is another step in that direction. It should be available on Z5 in the next couple of days, and it's really exciting. It changes the game completely for us because this is now not only AVOD anymore. And both Saugata and Gourav will agree with me. We are possibly running the most complex platforms when we try to run a AVOD plus SVOD sort of a business. It's very different when you're running an all SVOD play or an all AVOD play. Your tech complexities are very different. You're dealing with payment gateways. You're dealing with people who are for the first time in their life possibly making a payment for some content on an app. So there are the AVOD to SVOD journeys. There are the SVOD consumers, the pure AVOD guys, and then you open a UGC kind of a thing. Really, it's not easy. When it comes to UGC, content moderation becomes the key, right? And those are some of the things that need time to for machines to learn, and they only learn over a period of time. So whether it's smart AI engines, whether it's training AI engines, and we want to be a sensitive player, a player that has possibly learned and seen the mistakes made by other players. So if we want to come, if a Z5 needs to come into the UGC market, we come with a whole lot of responsibility towards the creators. So yes, I mean, it's definitely not an easy thing, but we're very excited.
More recently, we saw Flipkart launching the video service, and of course, I'm sure they had a choice and a big debate whether to launch the service standalone or on the platform, but they launched it on the platform. You also must have had this big debate internally. Hippie should be launched as a standalone product because the proposition is different. The consumer behavior is going to be different. But you chose to do the network effect by launching on your own platform. I mean, was there a big debate?
There definitely was a big debate, but when you launch a new platform, it's going through all the birth and delivery pains all over again, right? Because it means getting people to download your platform and so on and so forth. If you're already sitting on a huge base of consumers who have been on your platform for the last 2 years, you will start with wanting to leverage that base. with Z5, given the number of award shows we have, the number of TV shows we have, and the premium shows we have, there's an entire celebrity network also that's very easy for us to activate. So whether it's the influencers in the form of the smaller content creators, or I mean, in fact, they're huge now. The small form content creators, the short form content creators, or the big celebrity influencers who've been on other platforms, to onboard them into a proposition that's on Z5, that's verified, that's known to you, is a better and an easier bet to take. And then of course, of course that those decisions are never easy. Should it sit outside? Should it sit inside? Will it affect the larger brand? How will it affect the working of the brand? How will you have a single sign-on? So if you have paid subscribers who also want an account on Hippie, what are you going to do? How do Hippie, how do Hippie consumers then go on to becoming the SWOT subscribers if they ever have to? All of those questions are not easy to answer. But that's the fun, right? I mean, you don't have a book to refer to and you're writing pages every day. So that's the best part.
Interesting, very interesting. Saugata, this is a question which has come for you. And this is, I think, because you played a very dominant role in launching Hotstar specials. And now you're with Sony Live. And you have kind of a good view and vision of what's really happened in the digital, especially in the last 2-3 years. And now you have to draw a new runway for a new product. How would you differentiate your product promise from perhaps where you were working earlier or the other 6-7 top services? How would you differentiate?
So look, the fact is, like Aparna and Gourav pointed out, we are a part of big broadcast networks, right? And it's a very complex one to run with the AVOD and the SVOD services alongside. And to top it all with, we at least also have a live sport. So these are different beasts. At least at my previous company, we were heavily banking on sport as well. And this sports is a big thing for us here as well at Live. I think we are very focused in getting. Of course, my part of the job is the SVOD piece, which is getting into the subscriber base, making it a lot bigger and stronger. In terms of content play, I must say that we want to walk the middle path and create stories which are intrinsically Indian. And I think what I have managed to sort of own is that Sony per se, as a broadcast network, has been extremely, skewed towards the urban viewer, right? If you look at the other competition as well. So there is a big inflow of my audience who actually come on board on the SVOD, on the AVOD part, through the programming of my partners in the network television. What we're trying to do is to funnel that into our programming for SVOD. Of course, we're trying to give them a wide array of shows. We're very focused that most of the shows we're looking at interesting literature from this country. We are looking at stories from both hinterland as well as new Indian writers. But the focus essentially remains that we need to have a little peek into India, looking at anecdotes from history, looking at how do we discover this country through the storytelling, and that context is very, very important. So what we are trying to sort of do for our audience is to sort of give us not a homogeneous take of this country, but a very heterogeneous take of this country, if that makes any sense.
Of course. And Saugata, only you're very well qualified to answer this next question. I read, and I think you may have also read this, about how TV content did so well on digital, but when the reverse been tried, it's not been as successful. The OTT content hasn't done as well on television. It's not returned the favor.
I think it's a very wrong comparison to make, and it's an apples to oranges kind of a comparison. I think there is a habit. All of us, at least I have, and Aparna, of course, has been a part of broadcast network for a long time, and we know how how different, forming a habit is so difficult, right? And over time, there is a certain kind of habit that broadcast networks have formed for our audiences, and they look forward to it, right? Now, the fact is, OTT content is something which is pretty much much more individual focused, at least in our country. If you look at the number of people who are watching OTT in this country, the smartphone user by far is the largest chunk, and that too, so it's mostly it's like individual consumption mostly, right? Whereas television is much more family viewing. I think there is a sort of appointed viewing which happens with television, and that's a habit that we have formed over time. And people want to sort of stay on with the characters over several months, sometimes several years. It's just the reverse for OTT. In OTT, you have 10 hours of your life, and you want to really invest those 10 hours in one particular show, right? I think that's where I think that way it's the medium of it's the medium which is very, very, very important. If you look at the OTT, the broadcast content that you have on OTT play like ours, again, it's the AVOD viewers we are talking about. If you're looking at, is it bringing in as many SVOD viewers? Probably not, right?
Fair enough. Gourav, it is my firm belief, our content started traveling around the world, even a broadcast content, which is not as expensive content, but it goes, and perhaps Z started this journey of exporting Indian content to more than 50, 60 nations, then everybody started doing it. And now we're producing kind of, I think, much more expensive, bigger mounted, more well-researched stories on OTT. What's your view on our export capability of this content going outside India?
No, it's high. Candidly, we were not prepared for, we just launched a service, right? So I underestimated the appetite an international audience would have for the content that we put together. Now, truth be told, it is still people of South Asian descent. I haven't had people that flip, other than, obviously we translate in certain languages and things like that, but that's not the majority. But the South Asian diaspora itself, the appetite it has for the types of shows that we put out, and specifically OTT SVOD content was staggering to me. Nothing prepared me for that. And currently we've obviously launched in March, so we had done some benchmarking, so I knew there was an appetite. I didn't realize that it would result in such fandom, and internationally there's this massive quantity of piracy that also happens of a lot of our desi content, right? Which is there are boxes, there are all kinds of things that happen. Hang on a second. Sorry,
Yeah.
but also being at home.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of stuff that that one experiences that I at least did not realize, and I'm seeing a lot of my content in markets where we haven't been ready, running off pirated boxes because we generally just weren't ready. So in that sense, I think there is a significant opportunity. I don't think that we're still building content with the international audience in mind, though. I think it just travels really, really well. They like the nature of the stories we're telling. They are pushing the envelope, and in that sense, I don't think we need to do anything fundamentally different for a story to travel well. That's just my take.
There's a question, Gourav, which has come for you. It's specific to Wood Kids. The question says, I personally think your content rocks because it has the best of everything and very well curated.
Teams need to hear that. They work really hard. Thank you very much for that.
In fact, there's a good reason for me to knock the kids channel out of my TV pack. Not so good for Nina and team. How do you plan to do content marketing for Wood Kids, given it is largely library content for now, but the audience on OTT is used to fresh stuff?
Yeah.
So are you looking at kids as different to others who are perhaps happy with library content?
They are turning out to be different in the sense that I think that you need to keep moving the story forward, but the amount of library they watch is significantly in excess of what I can put on Boot Esport. So really, acquisition for Boot Esport is on the back of new originals. It's the same for any of my colleagues on the panel. But for kids, it's my library is just as good as an acquisition tool as some of the new stuff that we put out. And candidly, kids content actually takes much longer sometimes to put together, right? The journey is long. So we did put content out during the lockdown period, and you're right, kids have more time on hand, so they were watching our movies more than the shorties that we put out. But that was more scheduling from a release strategy point of view. It wasn't made during lockdown. We had that, and so we sort of knew what we were going to do. That it happens to be the same period as our vacation time. So our strategy wasn't that different for vacation and lockdown for kids. And so it's just worked out like that.
Gaurav, perhaps this is a question for you and Saugata both. This is more to do with the big news that we read every day about direct to digital movies. There's a lot of controversy, a lot of opinions. But then we also have platforms like Z5 and Netflix specific who've been commissioning stories and movies only for the digital platform. Yeah. They're not taking the movies meant for theaters only. They're also commissioning. Is your plan to commission movies as well besides web series? Is that a part of strategy, or you still let it evolve further?
Saugata, you want to take that? I'm happy to jump in.
Okay, so look, we are right now in the focus for us is clearly to invest in series, in seasons, shows, frankly. About films, I think we are very clear about the kind of films that we want to put on the platform. We are not commissioning films per se, but we are getting in somewhere midway, or we are buying some films which we think have great relevance, things which have great conversational value. But the focus remains fairly and squarely on the shows. We are heavily invested for the next couple of years on some it's a fairly robust lineup that we have drawn up. But having said that, it's a very, very dynamic market today, right? So it will be very, I think it wouldn't be right of me to say that, it is set in stone. Maybe, things change, things are changing every fortnight as we speak, right? Maybe in a couple of months' time, we will actually relook at commissioning films as well. But I tried doing that even in my previous company, and I realized that making films directly digital is it's a different ball game altogether, right? It's a chicken and an egg situation. You're constantly trying to play catch up, right? But I guess that is a zone that's emerging. I would say we are waiting and watching closely, but that's not the focus right now.
Aparna, you of course stand different to this because you've done some lovely films. I saw this Chintuki Mera Birthday, and then I saw Bhamfad earlier. You are acquiring films, but you're also commissioning films. How do you differentiate? What function does film play, which perhaps a series does not?
Films are a short new consumer acquisition tool. Right. So whenever we release a film, you have many more people committing to buy a subscription, and those who've bought a subscription committing to renew their subscription if you have a film. So films, right. And that clearly we've seen as the strategies that some other OTTs have also adopted, right? Big budget blockbusters and some very recent announcements, the kind of euphoria they generate, there always is something about a film. Bollywood and India have a very close relationship, right? So a direct-to-digital film also is no different. The best part about a direct-to-digital film is you don't need the commercial masala that you're typically going to need in a Bollywood film. So whether it is, you get to experiment with a good range of stories, with some really good actors, some really good teams. So, our recent release, Chukranu, which we made with Reliance, the output and the overall numbers that it got, or the reviews that it got, we were very, very happy with that. And it was possibly made at a budget that's quite enviable. And the output that we've got, the entire subscription for the month. Sorry?
We're not discussing budgets on this call. No,
we're not discussing budgets. But yes, I mean, it possibly is as good as acquiring a small budget film. But here you have complete creative control. You can associate with the producers you want to, who can give you that good scale, who can bring you good stories, who can attract good cast, who basically have the scale to pull off a good project, right? So direct to digital, we have a lineup of 12 films in the year. So it's almost like one a month that will either be a direct to digital and will be commissioned by us.
And then it also helps you with the overall promise now that you have. I read the word super app.
Yes, of course, of course. So there you will see a commercial film, a web series, and a direct-to-digital film every month, and then maybe some other piece of content in the fourth week. So,
Gaurav,
Rajiv, I think to answer your question, the sequence when you're doing a web series, you have to create these multiple hook points and things like that, And so, while we don't go chasing a film just for the sake of it, sometimes you come across a story which actually renders itself better as a film, right? You don't have to create the grammar of a web series to try and fit that in. That's when we would explore it, but otherwise, everything Saugata said, I think, sort of holds for us as well. We're not necessarily chasing that, but I think that we will do so.
Gaurav, I mean, we're almost towards the end of this session. I just want to ask you something, because there's something from where Saugata said earlier, that you all three are part of large television networks who have now spectacular digital products. And then there are standalone digital products in the country. You say that, with your 40, 60, 80,000 hours of content that you have a strategic advantage, the digital platform with, TV network support. You have a distinct advantage.
I think so. Frankly, I mean, there is Saugata talked about habit. There is a certain affinity to our platforms that is worth its weight in gold, right? It's our mandate or mantle to sort of step through the door and make good use of it. So I think that we already come in with an unfair advantage, and it's on us to sort of, take that to its logical conclusion. Obviously, there is a digital consumption wave that's underway, and I think that we're on the right side of that. But having that bank is invaluable. Having the fandoms that are created by television is invaluable, because at some level there's a familiarity that we don't need to create. We need to obviously push the envelope. That's kind of where we come in terms of, I guess, taking the consumer where we need to.
But taking one leap from there, Saugata, for you, once you have 60 or 70,000 hours of content, and here you are saying, I want to do 15 new series. I mean, that's like 150 hours versus this sea of content. I mean, you really need to have one, of course, conviction and a lot of, neck on the line when you kind of go on and say, listen, I want to produce this because this is going to stand out over and above your 40, 50,000 hours of content.
Well, I think, that's that, we are in the business of creating stories, right? I mean, sometimes you have to put your neck out and say, okay, this is going to really, I mean, I don't think great content was just made on the back of data. Great content has to be made at the back of gut, right? So data can only, guide you to a point, but I think it will not take you to the fruition. Having said that, I think, that 50,000 hours of content that we have as broadcasters, as part of broadcast network, gives us a great, great edge. The fact that there are people who are out there to watch those 50,000 hours of content probably are getting serviced by the 150 hours that I create, right? So the fact is, it's a win-win for us. And frankly, and I've been rather lucky to also have worked with two of these big broadcasters who have a really pivotal play in sport. I think India is a country where sport is extremely important, right? I've seen it in my previous company. I see it here. And we are very, very mindful of serving the best sport that we can to our consumers. And that really helps as well. That's sort of this a bucket which the standalone competitive platforms that we have, they don't serve that, right? So when I'm talking about to my audience, if they have to watch premier sport, they come to us, right? Whether it is soccer, whether it is tennis, whether it is basketball, whether it's WWE. So it's a huge input that we have as well. And like I said, those 100,000 hours of content is a huge bonus for us, so that I can, even if a little of that trickles in and discovers the content that we are making, I think we are in for a very long game.
Absolutely. Last question I'm going to ask very briefly for all of you. Aparna, if you were to list one big growth trigger for future and one dampener which can affect the growth of the industry, very briefly, what would you think are these two? Which one keeps you worried and what pleases you a lot?
The growth trigger will definitely be uh, the variety of content that's coming, because consumers do have the appetite for that. And I'm assuming that technology and everything in that sense only keeps evolving, and it's always a catch up game with how good you can be. So one, content, and two, consumer experience, right? So platforms that are at the center of giving a good consumer experience, whether it is with respect to content or an overall offering, really those two will be the key growth triggers. What really I think could be dampeners would possibly be, I don't see too many of them, but I do think
More
bandwidth
players,
and bandwidth speed.
more competition. Is that a dampener? Is there a worry?
No, competition is always healthy, right? Because we learn from each other. We grow. In fact, the pie is only growing. And at this moment, what everybody is really contributing to is growing the pie. We really all haven't got our own fair share of the pie. And the way the content business, it's always going to overlap. So even if when we all look at our own data, we'll see how much of a consumer overlap we have with each other. So in that sense, we are all frenemies. We neither friends nor enemies. So that, yes, I mean, dampener could definitely be maybe not as good data, because while we do talk about great speeds and a whole 4G network and things, that the fact remains that this is a country that still largely consumes over mobile internet, and that still has the potential to grow bigger and better. So that is yet, I mean, we've never thought payment to be a dampener or anything like that. Consumers are happy to pay for good content, so nothing really should stop the growth of OTT.
Gourav, same question for you. One big growth trigger and one dampener.
I think the
Return of Doordarshan.
no, absolutely, man. I think that's one of the things that you'll see in video on demand. Appointment-driven viewing limits where we can go as a consuming population, but video on demand unlocks a lot of things that you wouldn't expect. So I really like that, and I think that growth is only in one direction, because we've already just let the genie out of the bottle. There's no putting the genie back in. So I'm very clear about that. From a dampener point of view, I think Aparna mentioned bandwidth, and and even during this COVID period, we all had to suppress our bandwidths so that the networks didn't get choked. The speeds and stuff like that for consumers. So I think that needs to be looked at. The other area I think that we'll need to, if the appetite grows at the rate it is, focus on is a larger talent pool to service the amount of content that we all want to create together. I think that's proving to be a little bit of a constraint now, as everybody's got the will and sort of capability to reach these audiences. There's not that needs to get bolstered a little bit. So those are my
Absolutely. Saugata, same question to you. One big growth trigger as far as you're concerned, especially if you see Sony live, and second is of course the worry point, the dampener.
I think we're on the path of the growth is there. We if we walk right, it'll just grow. But I feel that we need to think. I think disruption in terms of content is something that we need to sort of look a little deeper. I think we need to have the ecosystem for this. This kind of making. This kind of content making needs to be developed much more. If you look at the two, so there are talent pool into what Gourav just touched upon. We have the makers of film and we have the makers of television, right? I think there is a new ecosystem that all of us need to sort of build to support the appetite, this huge appetite that the consumer has, and that is something for us to grow over time, right? About the dampener, I don't see much of a dampener today, apart from the fact that we need to get out of this pandemic. We need to get back to normal life. I feel that we are on a growth path. The sooner we get out of this pandemic, we should be on our way, and we should be continuing to, break barriers, do disruptive content, try out new things. The only thing that worries me is that we should not stop being differentiated, and we need to make that differentiated content, be it whoever, all the platforms need to try out that.
Absolutely, Saugata. And, wonderful discussion. Gourav, you, Saugata, Aparna, thank you very much. I think it's a very enlightening discussion. And clearly, I've not seen any industry discussion where one is so positive about the growth triggers that one really, even if there is one small dampener, one either negates it or overlooks it because it's so tiny in comparison to the growth opportunity. So I think, well said. We at Reliance clearly are very bullish about when the pandemic opens, both in the theater business, TV business, and of course, digital business. So thank you once again. Before you go, I want Rajika and Andy to come back, and I think they want to say a things. Rajika and Andy from Promax team, please, all yours.
Thank you, Rajiv. And thank you, Aparna, Gourav, Saugata. Thank you for joining us today. Before we wrap up, I believe Rajika has a special announcement to make. Rajika?
Yes, thank you so much, all of you. What a powerhouse of conversation that was. We wanted to take this opportunity to announce the digital dozens for our first year for Promax. As we all know, Promax continues to lead a worldwide community by celebrating excellence and industry development. As a platform, we'd like to recognize 12 future game changers who have made a difference, often in the shadows of their enormous brand or as an integral team member across different aspects of innovation. So these 12 winners have been shortlisted and handpicked by industry veterans and the Promax team. So please keep a lookout for this prestigious list we will be releasing very soon. Thank you so much.
So once again, Gourav, Saugata, Aparna, thank you. Wonderful discussion. We almost touched everything. I didn't realize within 1 hour. I think we could have gone longer. But like always, very entertaining and very enriching. Thank you, three of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Thanks
thank
so
you,
much,
audience,
guys.
for being here with us today. We hope you enjoyed
Thanks,
this
Rajiv.
webinar. If you have any suggestion or comment, email to webinar@promaxasia.tv. Do join us next week as we look at how you could access the health of your promotional strategy to meet your goals. Until then, have a good week. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Yes, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Saugata, Aparna.
Bye. Bye. Bye, Aparna.